Today, we're going to be ranking the greatest point guard from every NBA team. But there are some conditions. Players can only appear once on the list. So, for example, Chris Paul is the Rockets, Clippers, and Hornets' greatest point guard ever, but he can only have one of those spots. And the other condition is that the list is based on the time that these players played for that team. So, for another example, Jason Kidd played one season for the Knicks in his last year in the league, but it's not based on the fact that he did play there, it's based on how well he played in that 1 year of play. So with all that out of the way, let's get started with number 30, the Dallas Mavericks with Derek Harper. The Mavericks have had point guards like Steve Nash, Jason Kidd, Monte Ellis, Rajon Rondo, and Deron Williams, but most of them not in their prime. And a couple are going to be mentioned later, but because of that puts Derek Harper as the Mavs' all-time best point guard. And he was a solid starting point guard, but he was never an all-star. Number 29, the Indiana Pacers with Mark Jackson. He was never a real standout star, but he was one half of the Pacers' starting backcourt with Reggie Miller. He played a huge part with helping him through the playoffs, and even though he never averaged much more than 10 points and 10 assists a game, he had a huge role on that team. And he didn't have too much competition for this spot because the Pacers' other best point guards were guys like Darren Collison, George Hill, and Jeff Teague. Number 28, the Memphis Grizzlies with Mike Conley. Historically, the Grizzlies haven't had too many all-time great point guards, or even players in general, which easily makes Mike Conley their best point guard. His only competition for the spot would either be Jason Williams or a young Mike Bibby. Number 27, the Miami Heat with Tim Hardaway. Some of his best statistical seasons were with the Warriors, but in terms of success, his best years were with the Miami Heat. In his best season there, he averaged 20 points and 8 assists a game, was a 2-time All-Star, and a member of the All-NBA first team. And he consistently had huge games for them in the playoffs. Number 26, the New Orleans Pelicans, or New Orleans Hornets, with Baron Davis. I know what you're thinking, Chris Paul is without a doubt New Orleans' best ever point guard. But since he'll be appearing somewhere else on the list, their next best thing was Baron, who's one of the most underrated players in NBA history, and a part of that is because of all of his injuries. But in his short time in New Orleans, he was an NBA All-Star, leader in steals, and averaged 27 and 4. Allen Iverson even said that Baron Davis was the most difficult defensive assignment of his career. Now Iverson's no Bill Russell, but he played against some all-time greats. So for him to say that about Baron Davis is huge. Number 25, the Denver Nuggets with Chauncey Billups. He without a doubt played the best of his career for the Pistons, but when he teamed up with Carmelo on the Nuggets, even though he only played there for 2 seasons, in those 2 years they had back-to-back 50-win seasons, and Billups even finished 6th in MVP voting. Number 24, the Minnesota Timberwolves with Sam Cassell. The only other guys that could have been considered were Ricky Rubio or a young Stephon Marbury, but Cassell takes it because he's been the only Wolves starting point guard to ever be an NBA All-Star, and was a part of one of the Wolves' best teams ever, consisting of himself, KG, and Latrell Sprewell. Number 23, the 76ers with Maurice Cheeks. Oh, I know what you're thinking. Before you click off the video, you're expecting Allen Iverson. But it could really go either way on what his true position was, whether it was point guard or shooting guard, and I'm going to include him in the all-time shooting guards video. So as for point guards, it's Maurice Cheeks, aka Mo Cheeks. He's an NBA champion, a 4-time All-Star, and a great defender. And Philly even retired his number 10 jersey. In his best season, he averaged 15, 8, and 3, and he came up just as big for the 76ers in the playoffs. Number 22, the Houston Rockets with Calvin Murphy. I really wanted to give this James Harden, but again, we're going to include him in the shooting guard video. And as for Chris Paul, again, he's going to be mentioned somewhere else. So, Calvin Murphy. He was only 5'9", and he had a season averaging 25 a game, is one of the all-time great free throw shooters, and a member of the Basketball Hall of Fame. For this spot, he beats out guys like Steve Francis, Kenny Smith, and Kyle Lowry. Number 21. The Bucks with Sidney Moncrief. Milwaukee hasn't had too many outstanding point guards. They've had Oscar Robertson, who we're going to mention later, and guys like Brandon Jennings and Monte Ellis. Moncrief's a guy that gets forgotten about at times, but he was a 5-time All-Star, a member of the All-NBA first team, and a 2-time Defensive Player of the Year. He was a great two-way player, and a man that Michael Jordan even said this about. When you play against Moncrief, you're in for a night of all-around basketball. He'll hound you everywhere you go on both ends of the court. Number 20. The Raptors with Kyle Lowry. The man might blow it in the playoffs, but he's still the Raptors' all-time best point guard. He's got a tough style of play on offense and defense, and he's a guy that does a little bit of everything. He gets rebounds, assists, points, stops on defense, and even helps lead the Raptors in the locker room and on the court. He doesn't have much competition for the spot, beating out Jose Calderon and Damon Stoudemire for the best Raptors point guard. Number 19. The Orlando Magic with Penny Hardaway. We all remember Penny as one of the best players to go down to injuries, but before that happened, we did get to see how good he was when he played on the Magic. He was a 4-time All-Star and even finished 3rd in MVP voting at one point. He could get triple doubles, have 40-point playoff games, and do pretty much anything you could ask of a point guard. And he's by far Orlando's best, beating out guys like Jameer Nelson and Scott Skiles. Number 18. The Charlotte Hornets with Kemba Walker. Kemba's a guy we're just starting to see in his prime, but he's already Charlotte's best point guard of all time, beating out a guy like Muggsy Bogues, who was one of the Hornets' most popular point guards, but he wasn't nearly as good as Kemba Walker. Number 17. The Washington Wizards with John Wall. This one was a little harder to choose because it was between Gilbert Arenas or John Wall. In his prime, Arenas was a better scorer than John Wall is, or maybe ever will be, but Wall is the better defender. Maybe if Arenas stayed healthy and out of all the trouble he was in, we would definitely give this one to him, but he only had 4 great years for the Wizards before getting injured. And Wall's going into his 9th great year for the Wizards, and is really just coming into his prime. Number 16. The Atlanta Hawks with Mookie Blaylock. He's not the most popular player, but in the 90s he was one of the best two-way guards in the NBA. He played with Steve Smith and Mutombo, and in his best season in Atlanta, he averaged 17, 5, and 5 with 2.7 steals a game. He wasn't known as a star on that team, but for what he brought to the team, with having one of the best transition games and one of the most aggressive styles of play on offense and defense, he definitely should have been. Number 15. The Portland Trail Blazers with Damian Lillard. He made this year's All-NBA first team, and he deserved it because he's definitely one of the top point guards in the league, and without a doubt the best the Blazers have ever seen. He's just now entering his prime, so I think these next few years are going to be huge for him, and once the Blazers finally add some more talent, I wouldn't be surprised to see him in the MVP race soon. Number 14. The Spurs with Tony Parker. Now, what we saw from Parker this past season does not make him look like he should be ranked number 14, because he's well out of his prime now, but for his entire career, he's been one of the most consistent players in the NBA, and he only got better in the playoffs. With the help of San Antonio, Parker's played in the playoffs every year since 2002, won 4 NBA championships, and a Finals MVP in 2007. He's never been the biggest or most athletic guy, but that didn't matter because he was still one of the best finishers in the NBA, no matter who was guarding him. Number 13. The Chicago Bulls with Derrick Rose. Alright, so we all know how Rose's career ended up. But if we're just talking about the best point guard from every team and the time that they had there, we have to include the Chicago Bulls' Derrick Rose. The first MVP on this list and the youngest MVP in league history. And he definitely deserves the number 13 spot. Number 12. The Boston Celtics with Bob Cousy. Cousy was a 6'1" point guard that played in the 50s and early 60s, which meant that a lot of his skill and success got overshadowed by Bill Russell. And even though he played back in the day, he's still an all-time great. He played a huge part in winning 6 NBA championships, he was an MVP, a 13-time All-Star, and a 10-time member of the All-NBA first team. He ran the Celtics offense and averaged nearly 20 points and 8 assists a game for most of his career. Other great point guards from the Celtics, not better than Bob Cousy, are Rajon Rondo, Isaiah Thomas, and Nate Archibald. Number 11. The Cavaliers with Kyrie Irving. Even though Kyrie already left the Cavs, his run there was evidence enough to include him this high on the list, by not only his performance in the regular season, but in the playoffs and the finals too. Especially considering the fact that he did all of it before he was even 25. And we saw this past season just how much the Cavs struggled without him. Number 10. The Sonics/Thunder with Russell Westbrook. Whether he's a problem or not, with the stats he put up and the league MVP, those were enough to land him this high on the list. His only competition for best of the franchise would be against Gary Payton, and it's safe to say Westbrook's got him beat. Besides his 3-point shooting and sharing the ball, he's a great player at everything else, whether it's defense, finishing at the rim, the mid-range shot, and even the pick and roll game. Number 9. The New York Knicks with Walt Frazier. The Knicks have not had many great point guards in their history, and they still don't. But either way, Frazier deserves this spot for being one of the best two-way guards in league history. He played a huge part in beating the Lakers in the 1973 NBA Finals with his lockdown defense on Jerry West. He was a great all-around point guard, and that was the first of the 2 NBA championships he won in his career. Number 8. The Los Angeles Clippers with Chris Paul. When CP3 left the Hornets to join Blake Griffin on the Clippers, he instantly turned them into a playoff team. He's never been an amazing scorer, but he can get points whenever he wants, and he's one of the most complete point guards the NBA has ever seen on offense and defense, and one of the league's best leaders ever. The man's gonna be one of the captains of any team you put him on, and he's got the skill to back it up. He's a lockdown defender, can shoot from the 3, mid-range, score inside, and always get the ball to any of his teammates when he needs to. Number 7. The New York, Brooklyn Nets with Jason Kidd. Now, Kidd's never been the best in any one category, but he was great in all of them. And he was even one of the most consistent players in the NBA, which led to him being the league's all-time steals leader and second leader in assists in NBA history. And to go with that, he's been one of the best leaders the league has ever seen. At least on the court, that is. The season before he joined the Nets, they finished 26-56. And then the season he got there, they went 52-30 and made the NBA Finals. The huge turnaround led him to finishing second in MVP voting that year behind Tim Duncan. Number 6. The Phoenix Suns with Steve Nash. Whatever Steve might have lacked on defense, he definitely made up for how good he could pass, shoot, and control an entire offense. He had mainly all of his success on the Phoenix Suns, and that's where he won his 2 league MVPs. And he's always going to be remembered as one of the greatest to never win a championship. Number 5. The Detroit Pistons with Isaiah Thomas. Even though Isaiah Thomas was hated by most of the NBA during his playing career, he was always respected for how good he was. The Bad Boys Pistons team was definitely a group effort by the entire team, but it wouldn't have been possible with the pure skill and leadership of Isaiah Thomas. He beat so many of the all-time greats in the playoffs like Michael Jordan, Larry Bird, and even Magic and Kareem. Number 4. The Utah Jazz with John Stockton. There's no argument here. Stockton's been one of the most consistent players in NBA history and was a part of one of the best duos the league has ever seen. In his best seasons, he averaged 17 points, 2.8 steals, and an NBA record 14 assists a game, and put up similar numbers in the playoffs every year. And he wasn't just good on offense, because he made the all-defensive second team 5 times in his career. Number 3. The Golden State Warriors with Steph Curry. I know I'm going to be catching a lot of heat for putting Steph Curry at 3, but I don't know if there's an argument against it. I could maybe see one about how he shouldn't be ranked higher than John Stockton, and Stockton might have the better pick and roll game and a ton more assists than Curry ever will, but Curry's the better shooter and has more of an all-around game than Stockton did, and 2 more MVPs than John Stockton. Number 2. The Sacramento Kings with Oscar Robertson. Robertson won his only NBA championship on the Bucks, but he had far better stats on the Kings, and that's where he put up the first ever triple-double season. But the insane part about it is that Oscar Robertson not only had 1 triple-double season in only his 2nd year in the league, but he almost had 5 more just like it. And they were all with over 30 points a game. And they were all within his first 5 years in the league. And he did it without a 3-point line. And just kidding, that's it. Number 1. The Los Angeles Lakers with Magic Johnson. This one's a no-brainer. I don't know if there's ever going to be a point guard that we can actually say was better than Magic Johnson. He was 6'9", could play every position, and dominated on the offensive and defensive sides of the game. The only fault in his game would be that he didn't have a 3-point shot, but you can't even blame him for that because the 3-point line was put in the NBA in his rookie season. The best point guard from every team in NBA history. Don't forget to like, comment your thoughts, subscribe, and I'll catch you next video.